This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up? Real MVPs, Ricky Widmer here, and of course, you know the deal. I'm along with nobody for this podcast. Welcome in to the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast. Before I get into everything for today, I got a little bit of something I got to break to you guys. Is obviously, if you're on podcast services around the world, nothing has changed for you. You are still hearing my voice through your laptop, through your tablet, through your phone, through whatever you listen to the podcast on. But if you're on YouTube and you're like, Ricky, I was expecting to see your beautiful face today. First, I would say thank you for calling my face beautiful. It's only a face a mother could love. We're not going to be on video. You won't be able to see my face today. Obviously, you're looking at the logo, and that is because our camera, we've had some finicky issues with it, and I just did not want to deal with it for this. So while we're ordering the replacement lens that we have to have for our camera, sadly, this edition of the PTP will be audio only for both YouTube and podcast services around the world. But boy, do I have a jam-packed show for you guys. Going to be talking a lot of Big Ten in this one. So if you're a Big Ten fan, this one is certainly for you. I'm going to start out the show talking about the Michigan Wolverines. Going to then dive a little bit into Justin Herbert and his chances of winning the Heisman this year, kind of a extension of the conversation I had 2 weeks ago when I made my Heisman predictions. And then we're going to end the show. I'm going to welcome in patron Matt onto the podcast, and he wanted to talk about the Big Ten West and what's going down there and who could possibly win that division. So we're going to kind of dive into that before week one. And then obviously we got to end the show making my college football picks for week one, the same way Brandon and I used to do it, where I'll pick every top 25 game, every game involving a top 25 team, and then I will give you one game that is kind of my game of the week, where it doesn't have to be a top 25 matchup. It could be any game out there. It could be like Illinois versus Akron, and I can give you that winner, kind of like my game of the week for each week in college football. But before we get into everything, make sure to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. That is how you help support us. And if you want to be like Matt, who will be on the podcast later on, you can do so by joining us at the gold tier. So go check out the bronze, silver, and gold tiers. Those links are down below in the description. But let's jump into it. The first thing I'm going to look at today on the podcast is the Michigan Wolverines. And the reason why I'm bringing up Michigan and why we got to talk about Michigan heading into week numero uno is because of there's a lot of expectations on the Michigan Wolverines coming into this season. And the reason why I say that is there's no Urban Meyer. Everything that is going on with Ohio State, where Urban Meyer is no longer there. They've got a first-year starting quarterback in Justin Fields that's going to be taking the field, no pun intended, for the Buckeyes this season. Everything seems to point at this being the year, finally being the year, Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines not only break through and beat Big Brother, and I'm only going to say that because the record against OSU has not gone in the maize and blue favor, but also because Jim Harbaugh has proven he can't beat Ohio State. And when you're not winning the games, of course, people are going to call you little brother to your rival. But also people are asking, is this the question where, or is this the year where Michigan finally breaks into the college football playoff? And that's going to be our question for today. Will Michigan finally make the college football playoff in 2019-2020? And I could have also asked, will this be the first year they beat Ohio State? I think one goes hand in hand. If you don't beat Ohio State, you're not making the college football playoff. And if you do beat Ohio State, your chances are very good into making the CFP. So the first thing I want to dive into is kind of setting the stage and then giving my opinions with everything is, first off, let's look at Jim Harbaugh. This is his 5th season at Michigan. He's had an overall record of 38-14. In the Big Ten, he is 26-9. The big one that comes out, the big one that harps out, 0-4 against the Ohio State University. 0-4. And I will throw in there the 2016 game that was 30-27. That was a 2 overtime game. Michigan fans, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that was the game that I came in that week after and was hyping and raving and ranting and basically pissed off beyond my mind because Michigan should have won that game. There was a call late in that one that went in Ohio State's favor. Ohio State won that game. So I will give you guys that credit that should be 1-3, but still 1-3 is not anywhere near where you want to be if you're a Michigan fan. And then also the highest ranking under Jim Harbaugh was in 2016 where they were as high as 10 in the nation. When you look at this schedule, it is loaded with tough games. And I say loaded with tough games because you got to play the first few are a little easy, like Mid-Tennessee, Army, you should be able to get through, although I'll get to Army in a second. The big ones for me, you got to go to Camp Randall and play right now number 19 Wisconsin. Yes, it's at home, but you got to play number 20 Iowa. You're going to number 15 Penn State. You're at home against Notre Dame, number 9 right now, top 10 team. Michigan State's a tough one. Ohio State obviously being the biggest one. Those are all the ranked ones. Now, out of those games, Michigan State, Penn State, I think those are pushed to the side. I think those are going to be wins. Even a Wisconsin, I think Michigan has enough to beat the Wisconsin Badgers. I don't think this is going to be a Wisconsin team that we're all used to. I'll get to Wisconsin a little bit later when I have Matt on, though. To me, the biggest games, there are 3 on this Michigan schedule. They come October 5th at home against number 20 Iowa, who will probably be ranked higher when they come to play you in Ann Arbor. Then you've got October 26th, right before Halloween. Boom, you're playing Notre Dame at home. That's another tough one. They'll probably be undefeated, most likely undefeated at that point. And then you got the granddaddy of them all, and I know it's not the Rose Bowl, but you're playing November 30th, right before the calendar flips over into December, right after the turkey games and everything. You're playing Ohio State, who is most likely going to be a undefeated team heading into that week. So first I'm going to break down these 3 games. Then I'm going to look at kind of the roster and everything and give you kind of an overview for this question. So I'll look at each of these opponents because these are the tough ones that I have out there for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Number 1 are for the Michigan Wolverines. I'm looking at Iowa. They're going to be first. So Iowa up first. Iowa is going to be a team that if you have watched my predictions for the college football season, I do think it will be Michigan and Iowa playing in the Big Ten championship game. Iowa, they've got to play Iowa State on the road. That's going to be tough, but that's a winnable game for them. They've got to play Penn State. I think they can get it done. They got to go to Camp Randall. Yes, that'll be tough, but I think this Iowa team defensively, they've got the pass rushers to get after quarterbacks. That's going to take pressure off of the secondary. The biggest question for this team is the run game. Can they solidify that run game to help out Nate Stanley so that he can do his thing on offense and put points on the board for the Hawkeyes? Then they play at Nebraska later on. A lot of ats. At Iowa State, at Michigan, at Wisconsin, at Nebraska. Oh, and by the way, they're also at Northwestern. So I know I'm kind of picking the one that's like, man, Ricky, you are really stacking the deck against this team, but I think this team is good enough to get through these games, to win these games, and go on into the winner of the Big Ten West. And that'll kind of be a conversation I look forward to having with Matt later on. However, I don't think they get the better of Michigan on the road. I think Michigan will do enough to avoid getting hurt by that pass rush. And because Iowa doesn't have a good enough run game, I think Michigan, with their talent, will be able to win. Then the game I have no clue about is Notre Dame, because last year Notre Dame beat the Michigan Wolverines 17-24, but that was the first time we saw Shea Patterson in a Michigan Wolverine uniform. Like, that was the thing where I expected Patterson to come out and play a little better in that one. But you think about it, that was his first time gelling with those wide receivers. They didn't even have, I'll get to that, they didn't even have all of their wide receivers on the field for last year. They were missing a big one or two. And it wasn't the Michigan team, the best Michigan team that you could put on the field. He was still gelling. And obviously they lost that game. Now the thing with Notre Dame is, are they going to be undefeated heading into this game? Because yes, they play USC at home, and I do believe that they will win that game against the Trojans. The big one for me is they play at Georgia. And I know what you are thinking. But Ricky, like, this is a Georgia team that might take a step back this year. Like, they're not going to take no steps back. Let's just stop that right now. Like, Georgia is going to be the team I agree with. I believe it was Dave Pollock who said it on game day this past weekend. I think Georgia's the one that is the realistic challenger to, it was Dave Pollock on game day this past weekend. I agree with him. Georgia is the team that's going to challenge either Bama or Clemson for the national title. Like, they are the top of the list. And I don't think Notre Dame gets past a Georgia team in Athens. You're playing in Athens September 21st. I don't think Notre Dame's going to have enough. So they're going to come in to Ann Arbor with one loss already, kind of feeling the pressure a little bit. Because if you then lose 2 games, then you're looking at, wow, we're not making the college football playoff. Like, Notre Dame's going to come into Ann Arbor with 1 loss, needing a win. Because if they don't win, then they're not going to be in the college football playoff discussion with 2 losses. So that's why, to me, Michigan might come in and say, hey, you know what, we are, like, there might be pressure on the Michigan side as well, but I feel like at Michigan will get it done. Now, would it be a close game? Probably. I mean, 24-17 last year was pretty damn close also, but I feel like that plays into it as well. Notre Dame probably coming into that game with 1 loss. Notre Dame fans are going to disagree with me there. I know it. I'm well aware of it. I'm embracing it. And then you've got Ohio State, which this is the biggest game on the schedule, obviously. It's not just because it's Ohio State. It's not just because of the rivalry that these two teams have. Like I've said on podcasts before, I remember back when I was a sophomore in high school, my geometry teacher was a Michigan fan and went to several of those games. And he said that, and Michigan, Ohio State fans can tell me if I'm wrong, but he would say that they would tell the Michigan students that, hey, if you're going to go to the game in Columbus this weekend, I know you want to wear your maize and blue, but just you can cheer the team, but don't wear your Michigan gear, because they were so afraid of just hostility and violence being brought on them. So that's kind of where this rivalry is. These two teams hate each other. These two fan bases hate each other. And I look at Ohio State's schedule. Michigan State, they should be fine against. Wisconsin at home, they should be fine against. The big question for me, Penn State even, they should be fine against. The big question for me is, how are they going to do against a team like, I don't think it's Indiana this year. Usually it is Indiana, and it could be Indiana. Like, they're usually a team that tries to upset here and there, especially with Ohio State, and with that being on the road could be a game they fall into, first Big Ten game too. But the one I look at for Ohio State as their numero uno trap game is at number 24, well, 24 right now, at Nebraska, basically. And Nebraska, I'm going to get to it later with Matt. I don't know how to feel about them, because a lot of people are saying, oh, they're going to take a next step this year. They're going to win the Big Ten West, and Martinez is going to lead them to all these things. And you've got Scott Free. And it's like, I don't know if Nebraska is going to be as good as everyone says they are. They very well could be. And I'm not saying that, hey, you know what, Nebraska's garbage, don't think, like, I'm not saying that. I'm just looking at it from a, you know what, this is Scott Frost. I almost said Scott Freeze earlier. Scott Frost, second year with this team. Adrian Martinez coming into a sophomore year. This is still a fairly young team at places. And I know they got guys like Woodard, wide receiver, who's a transfer senior, but I look at it and I go, trap game for Ohio State because it's on the road at Nebraska, but they should be able to get through all their games, to where I feel like Michigan and Ohio State will be undefeated heading into this game. And the reason why I say Michigan wins the game this time around, because Michigan, I do believe, has some trap games on its schedule too. At Maryland could be a trap game. Usually Maryland, some of those home games, they play out. They could surprise Michigan. Do I think they get the win? No. Michigan wins and moves on. The other team is Army. This is an Army team that gave Kyler Murray, who was the number one pick in the NFL draft, gave him fits, and Oklahoma should have lost that game to Army last year. So there's a part of me that says that could be a big trap game, week number 2 for the Michigan Wolverines. But the reason why I think Michigan prevails, and I think they're going to go undefeated in the regular season, is because of some of the guys they have on this team. Number one, Shea Patterson returning for his senior year. Last year had 2,600 yards, 22 touchdowns, 7 INTs. That was with his first year with this team after transferring from Ole Miss. And I think he could do better this year. I mean, having a better rapport with the coaches, with teammates, being more comfortable in a second year in this system. I think him returning for the senior year this year is a huge benefit and a reason why. I mean, comparing to, you look at Ohio State, they've got a guy who just transferred over from Georgia, very, very talented football player in Justin Fields, but he's in a new system, new players. He's going to be very new and raw. And at this point, at the end of the season, you could basically have the argument of Ricky's basically a sophomore at that point. But I mean, Shea Patterson would be then closer to being a fifth year compared to a fourth year. So there's experience in the form of Shea Patterson that Fields just doesn't have, being new to Ohio State. Number two, they got 3 returning wide receivers. And these guys that they have, you've got Tariq Black, Nico Collins, and Donovan People-Jones. You got DPJ, if I can say that right, DPJ, Nico, and Tariq. And to me, the one that I focus on is Tariq Black, because this is a guy who missed last season. He's coming off of his second straight foot injury, to where he has had injuries the last 2 years. And when you look at the 2018, I'll give the recap really here. This is from 247sports.com. They said, entering fall camp last summer, Black was seen as possibly the team's best receiver. Instead, he suffered a second straight major foot injury, missing the first 7 games of the season. When he returned, be it due to rust or continued pain, his impact was minimal. as he recorded just 4 catches on 9 targets for 35 yards and no scores. Meanwhile, his classmates, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Nico Collins, each broke out for 600-yard seasons. So you've got Peoples-Jones coming back, or Peoples-Jones. You've got Collins coming back. Now you're adding Tariq Black into this wide receiver corridor where, to me, he's the X factor, where if he can be as great as all Michigan fans and everyone with Michigan thought he was, this team is going to be good. Like, that to me is the big thing, is the quarterback. You've got a returning quarterback who's an upperclassman. All 3 starting wide receivers are coming back in Black, Collins, and Peoples-Jones. And then the last thing, this goes over to the defensive side of things, is they've got upperclassmen returning at every single position but one starting position on the defensive side. And I look at this, there was also a thing where Jim Harbaugh said this could arguably be the best defensive unit up front that he's had at Michigan, which would be absolutely insane. So, like, that's to me why Michigan, I think, finally gets the better end of Ohio State. The only question comes the Big Ten title game. And this is where I think things kind of fall through for Michigan. So to answer the question that we were trying to answer at the beginning, will Michigan finally break through and make the college football playoff this year? I'm going to say no. And the reason I am going to say no is because of the Big Ten title game. How I feel things are going to happen is this will go into the last segment that we have later on with Matt, but I'll spoil it here. Sorry for audio listeners. I won't go too far into it. But there's a chance to me that Iowa comes up on top in the Big Ten West and meets Michigan in the Big Ten title game. And I just have a feeling that Iowa would lose the first meeting against Michigan, being in Ann Arbor, and then the Big Ten title game in Indianapolis. I think that could be the game where Iowa gets a second look at Michigan and beats them. And plus, the fear I have when it comes to Michigan and Wolverine faithful, Wolverine fans, let me know if I'm wrong in thinking this, but this is like an outsider opinion, thinking about it as well. I believe in the statement, I believe it was Paul Feinbaum said it this weekend, where he said, this year is all about Ohio State for Jim Harbaugh. It's all about Ohio State for Michigan. And my worry is if this Michigan team and the media and everyone, we put so much stock into Michigan beating Ohio State, you almost ingrain it into the head like that's the final goal. To where I almost have a feeling that with how much that's going to be ingrained and talked about this season, that when it does happen, it's almost going to be, yes, it's going to be relieving that finally we broke out and got a win over them. But I also have a feeling that it's also going to be the thing that hurts Michigan in the end. Because it's going to be like, we're going. Oh, great, we did it. But oh wait, guess what? There's another game after that game. To where that's not the Super Bowl. That's not the national championship. So for me, the biggest hurdle that Jim Harbaugh needs to get over is from week to week, not taking any opponent lightly, because if you take Wisconsin lightly in Camp Randall, they can get the win. If you take a Penn State lightly in, University Park, is that it for Penn State? They can beat you. You can take the Illini for granted. We're not going to beat anyone, and that's coming from an Illini fan. But I feel like the big one is if you do beat Ohio State, not being like oh, great, we finally did it. that there are games after that. And that's why ultimately I feel like Michigan's going to fall up short. I think they're going to go undefeated in the regular season, lose to like an Iowa or even like a Nebraska or Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game. You could plug in anybody there. I think that they lose that game because it's like, oh my God, we got past Ohio State. Yes, we did what we wanted to, and then, oh wait, there's another game after that. So this is where you guys obviously come in. Let me know what you guys think about the Michigan season. Are they going to get to the college football playoff? Are they even going to beat Notre Dame and Ohio State? Are they going to get upset by a team? Are they going to win the Big Ten totally? What is your thought process down below? Let me know. I'd absolutely love to hear it.